All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Fox. Welcome back to my Bible study. I had to move everything around this week, so I forgot when I went live that nothing was set up. All right. That looks pretty good. Go up a little bit. Okay. So, welcome back to my Bible study. So, last week we did our study in Leviticus chapter 17, or chapter 16, excuse me. And this week, what I want to do is actually go back into the book of Revelation and look at this Mystery Babylon and look at what the book of Revelation tells us about Mystery Babylon. Remember when I did the cast of characters and we listed all the different entities and people and so-called characters in the story of the book of Revelation? And one of them was the harlot. One of them was the beast, the Antichrist. Well, in the book of Revelation, the harlot is actually talked about a lot. She's talked about almost more than any other so-called character in the story. 2 entire chapters are devoted to her. The beast only has 1, although he's mentioned here in Revelation 17. Is that where we're at? Yeah. But the book of Revelation actually tells us a lot. So remember, we're talking about symbolism in the book of Revelation. And so, when John starts talking about how he's being shown, this great whore, this harlot, we're not meant to understand, oh, he's seeing this prostitute or whatever. We're meant to go, oh, I think this is a symbol here. I don't think John is really trying to tell us about some harlot. This is a symbol. And we're meant to really gain understanding about the so-called harlot by the story that's being told. And we're given all of these clues, right, via the symbolism. So when we're introduced to this, this great whore, we need to ask questions like, well, okay, what do we think of when we think of, a prostitute? What kind of images come to mind? What's associated with the prostitute? How does a prostitute operate? We're not just talking about, like, a lot of times the first thing that will come to our mind is maybe, this scantily clad, dressed woman on the street corner, and of course there's, sex involved and there's money involved. All right, but as we continue to really look at how the harlot operates and everything that's involved, we really start to have and gain a greater understanding to this harlot that John is talking about. And that's what I want to do today, because as we continue in our study in Leviticus, so last week we did Leviticus 16, and as we go into Leviticus 17, we start seeing this word whore come up. It's never come up before in the study in Leviticus. This idea of going a whoring, it comes up in Leviticus chapter 17. And so what I've been doing is just correlating, Revelation 12, Leviticus 12, Revelation 12, Leviticus 13, Revelation 13, and seeing if we see any similarities. And lo and behold, I'm finding all of these connections. And so when I was continuing in the study in Leviticus, I was actually reading in Revelation 17. And I thought, surely we're not going to have another connection as continuing this study in Leviticus. Like, that has to be done now. Like, there keeps being a connection every chapter that I study in Leviticus. There's a connection in the correlating chapter in Revelation. And I keep calling this a coincidence. I mean, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's not. Obviously, I don't think it's a coincidence. But hang on one second. Oh, I was going to open that door, but I can't. There's a storm outside, and it's been really chilly all morning, and now I'm getting really, really warm. I think it's because I've got the heat flowing downstairs. I should have thought to turn that off before we started. But anyway, I've been having some construction done on my home, and they've sealed off this door. So I could open it, but I was told not to, so I'm not going to. But the window's open, so hopefully we'll get a little breeze in here. Anyway, I was studying in the book of Revelation, and it's all about the harlot in Revelation chapter 17. Went back to Leviticus 17, and lo and behold, we have another, what I'm calling a connection or a thread. And so before we go through our study in Leviticus 17, once again, I feel that we need to go and explore what is written in the end times prophecy, what's written in Revelation, so that then I can later connect the two. Because if you're not familiar with the harlot and you're not familiar with what the book of Revelation says about the harlot, then when I try to attempt to connect the two, it's not going to make any sense whatsoever. So today we're going to actually begin. The study is going to be entirely on the harlot, who I call the harlot. Now, she actually goes by other names. She goes by Mystery Babylon, or Mystery Babylon the Great, actually. Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of all harlots. She goes by the whore. Okay, so these aren't very nice words, obviously, but this is the symbolism that John is given in this image that he is being given. Now, one thing I want to say about the book of Revelation, people want to argue over whether or not the book of Revelation is in chronological order or not. And I don't even understand how people can argue about this. To me, it seems so obvious that it's not, because what we have are events that take place, and you can place them on a timeline, right? These different events. And then you'll have, in another chapter, you'll have further details about a particular event, right? Where you can create its own little timeline of details that all fall into this one event, right? But this story might not be told until down here. And so if you think the book of Revelation is chronological, then you have to, in your mind, you have to understand that chapter 1 takes place, and then all of chapter 2 takes place, and then all of chapter 3, and so on, right? If you believe that it's chronological. And so, for example, last week we were talking about, we've been looking at the bowls, the wrath of God, those 7 bowls, which are laid out in chapter 16. All 7 of them, the whole story of the wrath of God being poured out onto the earth. And it finishes with the 6th bowl, which is the Battle of Armageddon, and then the 7th bowl where God says, it's done. Okay, so it's the telling of these 7 bowls being poured out, and then it's done. All the bowls have been poured out, and the reign of the beast is over at that 7th bowl, once God's olive wrath is poured out onto the earth. Okay, then we go into chapter 16, and if you are of the mind and of the thinking that Revelation is in chronological order, you would assume that all of the events in chapter 17 would entirely take place after that 7th bowl. But it's not the case. It's what I just showed you here, where now they're going to narrow in and give great detail about a particular cast member of the book of Revelation, which is the harlot. Okay. And the harlot is destroyed before the beast even rises to power. She's going to be destroyed before the 3.5-year reign of the beast begins. Actually, I believe it's on the very same day. The beast rises to power, and the very first thing he does is destroy the harlot. Why? Well, because the harlot has been running the show, right, for a very, very long time. The harlot has the same agenda as Satan. They have the same agenda, similar agendas. Okay, but the harlot has been running the show, but the beast wants to run the show. And so in order for him to rise to ultimate power, he has to wipe out who's in ultimate power, and that's the harlot. So I think that's the very first thing he's going to do. He's going to destroy the harlot in a single hour. We're going to look at all this. We're going to go through a verse-by-verse study today in Revelation 17. We're not going to do every verse because I want to get into Revelation 18 too. Both chapters are about the harlot. All right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to write down many of the clues that we are given, just to kind of visually see and better understand who this harlot, what we're talking about in regards to this harlot. So I'm in Revelation 17. Let's begin in verse 1. It says, "And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me." All right. So remember, John is being given all of these visions. He's being given the visions in a particular order, and he's writing them down in the order that he's been given them. And this is what we have in terms of this book, Revelation. He says, one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials. Remember, this previous chapter, he was shown the 7 vials, or the 7 bowls. The 7 angels poured out these 7 vials. They are the wrath of God upon those who dwell upon the earth. So this angel comes up to him, it says, and talked with me. So he strikes up a conversation with John, this angel. And he says, and saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So what I'm envisioning here is John was just given this vision of these 7 bowls poured out onto the earth, God's wrath poured out onto the earth, bowls 1 through 7. And now one of these angels, doesn't say which one, comes up to John, strikes up a conversation, and asks him, or says to him, come with me. He says, because I'm going to show you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So this angel is basically saying, and come, I'm going to show you another vision now. I'm going to show you another, come with me. You just saw this vision of these 7 bowls. Now I'm going to show you another vision. It's the vision of the judgment of the great whore. So the first 2 clues that we have from here in verse 1 is he says, I'm going to show unto thee the judgment of the great whore. So we know in the book of Revelation, judgment comes up twice. We've talked about this before. It's the judgment of this harlot. I'm going to refer to her as the harlot because I really hate this word, even though they're the same. The judgment of the harlot. Remember, judgment is synonymous with wrath. Okay, it's condemnation. It's God's justice. It's his judgment. It's his pouring out of his wrath on those who have, violated him. It's his vengeance. And it occurs twice in the story of Revelation, once upon the harlot and then later upon the beast. Okay. Here we're going to see the judgment upon the harlot and her system, right? She sits on many waters, the judgment of the harlot and her system. And then later, right, when those 7 bowls pour out, we're going to see God's judgment or his wrath upon the beast and his system, his kingdom, his followers. So 2 different times we see God's judgment in the book of Revelation, and neither time is God's judgment or his wrath meant for his people. That is, human beings made in the image of God. Not that there won't be human beings made in the image of God that suffer at the consequence of this wrath being poured out. And in some cases, it will be meant for them because they've sided. They're on his side. They're on Satan's side. They're part of that synagogue of Satan. They worship Satan. Okay. But the judgment for people, for you and for me, for humans made in the image of God, is at that great white throne judgment at the end. And the way to be immune to having to have your day in court is to be resurrected in the first resurrection. Only those resurrected in the second resurrection will have their day in court. They'll be resurrected. The books will be open. They'll have their day in court. They'll have their judgment day. All right. All the believers that were resurrected in what's called the first resurrection, which has many parts, they are blessed and holy is he that is part of the first resurrection. Okay, they don't have to be a part of that day of judgment. In fact, they're going to be there watching and be sitting on thrones, and some of them will be judges. But this harlot, she will have her judgment. It's not going to be the great white throne judgment, but she will have her judgment. Let's start a list here. So she will be judged. She will be judged. I show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Here is clue number 2. She sits on many waters. Now, we've talked about this before. Many waters. This is an example of where we go, I think this might be a clue or a symbol, because we're not actually talking about this woman sitting on waters, right? We're meant to go deeper with the clue that we're given. What do we know about water? Well, we know it's everywhere. She sits on many waters. Where in this world are the many waters? Are we talking about a case of water bottles? Are we talking about raindrops? We're talking about all of it. We're talking about the oceans and the seas and the rivers and the streams and the geysers and the rain and the clouds. Water is everywhere. Water is everywhere. And water infiltrates. I was telling you about this construction I'm having done. Last winter, we had a major, a lot of rain and then an ice storm, and we had freezing out here on my balcony. And then when it started to thaw, it made its way into the house and it was gushing into my dining room. It damaged drywall and it did some damage. And when I was talking to different contractors to do the repairs, they would all say the same thing. They'd say, yeah, that water, it finds its way into everything. It finds its way into everything. And so I think that's what we're meant to understand about this harlot, and that she's sitting on many waters, is that she's infiltrating as much as she possibly can. Okay. And we're going to look here in a minute as we go further that she has an origin. We see her origin here in this study. And so what I'm saying is this harlot, from her origin, she has set out to infiltrate all things. And we know that she has an agenda, and her agenda is a satanic agenda. In other words, it's very similar to Satan's. It's of dominion and rulership and power and wealth and pleasure and me, right? How can me, myself, and I and ours rise to the top at the cost of any and everybody? We don't care about them. Okay. Selfishness, pride is the satanic agenda. And so it's her agenda as well. It was implanted and embedded in the harlot from the beginning, from Satan, to infiltrate everything, right? Because Satan has had many attempts of getting that dominion of the world and failing. And so the way I look at it is that Satan decided, we're going to play the long game. Okay. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And if we can really infiltrate the whole world and put people to sleep, right? Make them drunk with we're going to see this, that they're drunk, make people drunk. Then they won't even know. They won't even know what's going on. And we'll have the control, and we can do whatever we want. Just like they wanted to in the beginning. God came and said, if we allow these people to move forward with what they're doing, they will achieve all they set out to do. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So here in verse 1, we learn two clues. One, the harlot will be judged. Not at the great white throne judgment, though. However, it will happen. We're going to see a lot of detail about her judgment here in the study, but she will be judged. And she sits on many waters. She's everywhere. Verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Now, there's a lot in this little verse right here. Let's first of all start with these kings of the earth. This is another character in the book of Revelation. The kings of the earth come up. Just off the top of my head, I can think of 4 different instances that this phrase, kings of the earth, it's always talking about the same group of people. It's a symbol of rulers. Okay, they're kings, they're rulers. The kings of the earth. I like to call them, again, abbreviating, kings of the earth. So we have the dutes, those who dwell upon the earth, and we have the coats. The kings of the earth. The kings of the earth comes up, again, I think 4 different times that I can recall just right now. In the book of Revelation, they are a cast member in the story. The kings of the earth. Here it says that the kings of the earth are committing fornication with the harlot. Okay? So they fornicate with the harlot. Now, when we think of fornicate, we often, first thing that comes to mind is sexual relations, like outside of marriage. And when we look at the Strongs, let's look at it really quick. It's actually the Greek word porneo, which is where we get our word pornography. And it means to act the harlot. That is literally to indulge in unlawful lust of either sex. To indulge in unlawful. So unlawful lust or sex is sex outside of the confines of marriage. That's, biblically speaking, unlawful sex is sex out of the confines of marriage. So if you are having sex and it is not with your spouse, you are committing fornication. It goes on to say, or figuratively, to practice idolatry. Okay, so when we talk about fornication on a physical level, it's sex out of the confines of marriage. But when we talk about it on a figuratively, It's to practice idolatry, right? Because remember, fornication is not being faithful to the one, right? You're not being faithful to your spouse, even if you've never been married. Let's say I'm 18 and later I'm going to get married when I'm 25, but I'm having, sexual relations when I'm 18. I'm not being devoted to my future husband, right? And that's unlawful. I am not being devoted to him, even though I haven't met him yet. I'm not devoting myself to him if I'm having sexual relations with somebody else. This is fornication. It's adultery, it's fornication, and figuratively, it's idolatry, not because it's the same thing, but because it's the same premise, whereby on the physical level, we can betray or not be faithful to the one spouse, right, the one husband. But figuratively, when we talk about idolatry, it's not being faithful to the one God, the one true God. So when we talk about idolatry, fornication, adultery, it comes down to devotion to the one. Okay. And we're going to look at this harlot in a minute. And one of the things we're going to understand about her is she is not faithful to the one, right? Instead of being faithful to the one, she spreads herself out among the many. And this is imagery that we get from prostitution, right? There's no faithfulness to the one if you're sharing yourself with the many. Okay, so this is a really important thing to understand because it's what's being told through the symbolism here, is the importance of faithfulness to God. And the fact that this harlot has no faith towards God. She's anti-God. She's anti-God. She spreads herself out among the many. Idolatry. Okay, so what I want to do really quick, I want to get a little list going over here of what we think about when we think about this word. We think about someone who gets paid, right? We think about someone who is used and then tossed away when there is no more any use left, right? Like when she gets old or sick or she's not beautiful anymore and there's no use for her. She's tossed away. There's this idea of I'll scratch my back, you'll scratch mine kind of a thing. In the Latin, this is called quid pro quo. We see this a lot in politics, quid pro quo. This I scratch my back, you scratch my back. It's this idea is I'm going to do something for you under the condition that you're going to do something for me. And so we see this with lobbyists. We see it with people getting elected. We see it with policy being passed, right? Where donors, very wealthy donors, give a lot of money in order to, for something to happen that's going to benefit them. Okay. And so that's the other thing we see when we think of this whore is benefit, right? Usually for both parties, but usually there's a great benefit for the one that's using the prostitute, right? That's the whole idea. That's where the instigation comes from. And we can add some others to this list as we go along. I meant to do that from the start, so I want to get that going. All right, so we're at verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now, we've been looking at those who dwell upon the earth. Here it says the inhabitants of the earth. Now, this could include those who dwell upon the earth, but this is broader. This is everybody. The inhabitants of the earth, I think, is telling us that everybody on the earth, it's really coming down now, everybody on the earth has been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Okay, so the inhabitants of the earth are made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So this, the kings fornicate with the harlot. Okay, and the outcome is drunk people on the earth. Okay, the kings plus the harlot equals drunk people. This is the outcome, and this is what the harlot wants. This is what Satan wants. They want the people to be drunk. And so this is part of the agenda. Okay, the agenda of the harlot and the agenda of Satan, it's twofold. It's to have the power, which means you have the control, which involves drunk people. That's the power, the dominion. Okay, and the other is wealth, and I suppose they go hand in hand. The power, the wealth, the fame, the popularity. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. They've been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So the dealings of the kings of the earth, rulers, the rulers are in cahoots with the harlot so that the rulers can get what they want out of the harlot at her expense. The harlot, again, it's just I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And so they are all benefiting for the time being. That is the harlot and the kings of the earth. They're all benefiting. But there will come a day, we're going to read about it here, that it's the destruction of the harlot. She's going to be tossed away. When the beast, lightning, when the beast rises to power and he wants to be king of the whole world, he's going to have her destroyed. Here's the thunder. All right. So verse 3 says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. Now this is really interesting, and this ties us. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness is the same exact thing that happens. Jesus in the wilderness, tempted by Satan, Matthew. Let's look this up really quick. It's Matthew 4, verse 1. It says, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And if we go down to verse 8, it says, and again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and said, all this I will give you. He said, if you bow down and worship me. And of course, Jesus says, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So here we have this in Revelation. We have a verse that should, if we're studying our Bibles, it should strike a memory where we've seen this before. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Here it says, so he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness. And what is John going to see? He is going to see this harlot, and she's seated on the beast. When we combine these two verses, we understand that Jesus was taken by the Spirit into the wilderness where he saw Satan. And what did Satan do? Satan tempted Jesus. He offered him the whole world. If you'll humble yourself below me, Satan said, and worship me, elevate me, humble yourself, I'll give you everything. And Satan, in a sense, had the power to do that because he's the prince of the power of the air of this world. And because he controls the harlot who runs the whole world. And he has, even at that time. And so what we understand from this, when we look at these clues, is that the harlot and Satan are in cahoots, right? They're working together. And when Jesus was brought into the wilderness, he was offered the whole world and its splendor, luxury, wealth, beauty. And of course, he said no to it because he's perfect. But the idea here is the harlot has the ability that Satan has given her, the authority to offer things to people, right? That make them wealthy and powerful and rich, that raise them up. But in order to do so, there's that quid pro quo. There's these dealings going on. There's exchange going on. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes people sell their very souls, which we're going to see in this study. It's mentioned. Okay, verse 3. So he carried me away. This is this angel. He carries John away in the spirit. And I saw a woman, this harlot, sit upon a scarlet colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, so he sees a woman, and she sits on a scarlet beast. All right, so we've got some clues here. We know the woman is the harlot. Here we have a beast, a scarlet beast, and we'll see as we read on in the next chapter, there's a whole listing of the commodities of the world, right? That makes the kings of the earth wealthy. It makes the harlot wealthy, the commodities of the earth. And scarlet is mentioned and purple is mentioned. It's talking about fabric. Of course, that's not of relevance today. But in the day when all of these commodities were mentioned, they were great commodities of great monetary value. We know extra biblically that fabrics like scarlet and purple. Jesus, they put a purple robe on him when they crucified him because they were mocking him. They put a crown of thorns on him and they called him the King of the Jews. Purple robe. The purple stands for royalty. And now this harlot, she's dressed in, we're going to see in a minute, she's dressed in purple and scarlet. But she's seated on the beast, and I don't want to talk too much about the beast in this study because we can do a whole other study strictly on the beast. They totally go hand in hand, but it would take a couple of hours to go through both. So I'm going to focus on the harlot today, and we're going to get as many clues up here as we can so we can understand the story that's being told. The woman is seated on a scarlet-colored beast, okay, and this beast, it says the beast is full of names of blasphemy. Full of names of blasphemy. Now, when we look up this word blasphemy in the Strong's, it means vilification, especially against God, blasphemy, evil speaking, railing. So it's this idea of cursing and shouting and proclaiming and blaspheming and railing against God. It's all anti-God. It's highly passionately anti-God. This full of the names of blasphemy. The beast, he's full of the names of blasphemy. It says he has 7 heads and 10 horns, which actually, the angel actually kind of decodes what the 7 heads are, what the 10 horns are. But again, we're not going to focus on the beast in this study. Verse 4, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color. So she was dressed in purple and scarlet. Again, purple being royal, a color of royalty, and scarlet. We're talking about commodities here. We're going to see that in the next chapter when the purple and the scarlet are mentioned in the list of all of these commodities, again, that make the kings and the merchants and the harlot very, very, very wealthy. It says the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and decked. She was decked. This word decked, it's actually, what is it? It's bespangled. She was bespangled with golden ornaments. So the imagery here is a very wealthy, royal, beautiful woman. It says she was decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand. She was decked. She was decked. We're talking about wealth here. She's decked in gold and precious stones and pearls. And it says she has a golden cup in her hand. This is another symbol for royalty, right? It's the kings and the queens that have the golden cup. Okay, not commoners. So again, with the royalty. And of course, is she actually royal? Well, no, but she thinks she's royal. In fact, later she's going to say she sits a queen. And the idea we're meant to understand is this, the harlot sits above everyone else, at least in her eyes. And in reality, I guess you could say that her blood and her bloodline is, in a sense, by her definition, royal. I mean, what does it mean to have royal blood? I mean, these are kind of phrases and, I mean, terminology that we use today about certain families and bloodlines of importance. What is it really? I mean, that's a good question to ask. So she has a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So John is really painting a picture here. She's got this golden cup, and it's, hang on, it's full of abominations and filthiness. What do we know about filthiness? Well, we just got through a few weeks ago doing a study on what's clean and unclean. A pretty in-depth, I mean, the book of Leviticus gives us a lot of information about this idea of defiled versus undefiled, holy versus unholy, pure versus impure, clean versus unclean, righteous versus unrighteous. I mean, they're all different words saying the same thing, trying to get the point across that there are two categories in this world. There's clean and there's unclean. And we're all in that unclean category. We're all in the filthy category. But God has made a way to wash us clean so that we can be in the clean category. Now, the harlot, she's in the unclean category. She has a cup full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. He's really painting a picture here. Let's move this so I have more room now. Okay, number 9. Verse 5, and it says that upon her forehead, so she's got something tattooed, engraved, stamped, written on her forehead that tells us who she is, right? A shining billboard, if you will, a neon light, if you will, so that John does not mistake who this person is. Her name is going to be written on her forehead, just like we're going to see with the beast. He's going to have his mark that will either have a, I don't know, it either goes in your right hand or on your forehead. The 144,000 of Israel are going to be sealed with the Spirit of the living God on their forehead. I don't know if this is literal or if we're just meant to understand that once you are sealed and marked, that's who you belong to. And here it says that upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery Babylon. And we actually get quite a few clues just from this alone. Let's just finish. It says mystery. And so John has this in all caps. This is how he wrote it. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. That's what's written on her forehead. All right. So first of all, when we look at this word in the Strong's, this is the Greek word mysterion, and it means a secret or mystery through the idea of silence imposed by initiation into religious rites to shut the mouth. To shut the mouth. So we're talking about keeping secrets. We're talking about initiation into religious rites. We're talking about secret societies. Okay? And I'm not going to really talk in depth on that. If you know, you know, and I'm pretty sure you know, it is rumored there are secret societies among us. Some of them have been revealed. Some of them we know the names of them. Some of them have even had their symbols, their codes decoded, right? Because they have to keep their mouths shut and they have to talk to each other through symbolism. Okay, so that's the mystery part. It's the secret societies. And then the Babylon part takes us back to the original Babylon. We find it in Genesis where Nimrod, the king, and his cronies say, let's build a tower up unto the heavens and make a name for ourselves. And God said, let's go down there and see what's going on. And when he did, he said, no, if they continue to do what they're doing, they will accomplish all they set out to do. And so he scattered them and he confused their languages. He didn't destroy them. He could have. Instead, he scattered them and he confused their language. Why would he do that? Well, I think that what he essentially was doing, he's going to use Babylon and the Babylonian agenda. It's going to be a part of what he's doing. And so he doesn't destroy them. He scatters them and confuses their language in order to slow them down because he wants everything to work out according to his timeline, right? To the will of God. And he says that these guys, what they're doing, they're going to accomplish all they set out to do. He doesn't kill them, he just slows them down. And so this Babylonian agenda, which started back in Genesis with these Nimrod and these others that said, let's build a tower, make a name for ourselves, which when you first read that, you think, what's the big deal? So they wanted to build a tower. I think the big deal there is this really the Babylonian agenda in a sentence there. And that is that they cared about the self and they didn't care about God. They were anti-God. Because when we talk about the fruits of the Spirit and the things of God, it's not things like self-righteousness, pride, and selfishness, and greed, and power, and fame, and fortune, and vanity, right? The fruits of the Spirit and the things of God are all the opposite of those things. It's humility, it's compassion, it's sacrifice, it's weakness. And so when God saw this group being very anti-God and having this agenda, he knew what they were setting out to do, and he knew that they would accomplish it. And so all he did was slow them down. He scattered them around the earth, which meant they were going to have to make this slow comeback. And a day would come when communication, technology, everything would increase, and then their agenda could start to get back on track and start moving quicklier and quicklier and quicklier, which is where we are today, I think. So Mystery Babylon, that takes us back to that original city of Babel. And they're the same thing. If you look them up in the Strongs, it's talking about the same city. It's Babylon. Mystery Babylon takes us back to the original mention of Babel in the Bible. Let's build a tower unto the heavens and make a name for ourselves. Let's sit up in our ivory tower with all of the minions down at the bottom, and let's have control over them. It doesn't say that, but this is what I'm extrapolating from let's build a tower unto the heavens. It's this idea of great highness, great power, and great control over all of the people at the bottom. Okay, which is what we see in secret societies. It's working your way up to the top where the few are. The many are at the bottom, right? The minions are at the bottom. The ones that aren't in the know, the ones that are the worker bees and the, that are being used for the benefit of the ones at the top. So I think that's the idea here when we're talking about Mystery Babylon. It says, and upon her forehead was the name Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. So she has offspring. So she had her origin there at Babel, and she has continued to live on through her offspring. And the Babylonian agenda has been preserved and passed on and kept alive through her offspring. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. Okay, so we have the original so-called harlot there at the foundation of Babylon, and now we have the continuance through her offspring, the mother of harlots. And it says the mother of abominations of the earth. So the harlot is anti-God. That's what these abominations are. Okay, let's look at the word. Abomination, detestation, that is specifically idolatry. It's idolatry. It's not being faithful to the one God. No faithfulness, no love, no devotion, no, it's a betrayal of God. It's being against God. It's being anti-God. So when we continue to see these words come up that really essentially come down to idolatry, both with the harlot and the beast and Satan, they all kind of have similar anti-God agendas. But of course, Satan is over all of that. Okay. We won't get into the whole backstory there. We've talked a little bit about it. You can go back and read Genesis chapter 6, when those fallen angels come down to the earth. Back then, and it says that they do it again. It said in those days and again after. So this infiltration of fallen angels onto the earth, it happened before the flood and it happened after. And this introduction of Nimrod, this king, wanting to build a tower and make a name for himself, this was after the flood. So I think all of it is connected. The Babylonian agenda is the satanic agenda. Okay, verse 6, it said, and I saw, okay, so we've got Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Remember, she's mother of harlots. Okay, so it's not just her, there are others. It's the continuation down the line. She's the mother of harlots. There is an offspring, a continuation of the Babylonian agenda. She's the mother of abominations of the earth. Verse 6, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So this goes back to, any believer who was ever killed at the hand of the harlot. This could be people who died in war, because she is the mother of war. It could be people who were martyred in their faith, which has been happening all throughout history. It'll happen to this multitude that we see in Revelation that shows up in heaven and cry out, how much longer, God, until you avenge those who dwell upon the earth, who are killing us, that's like killing our brethren and so forth. These are the martyrs of the harlot. She's drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. Okay. She's drunk with the blood of saints. Okay. Probably would include, going back throughout the prophets. She's responsible for their death. If you all you have to do is think about this. If you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, this seems pretty out there. It's a reach or a conspiracy or whatever. Just stop and think about it for a second. Regular, everyday, common human beings like you and me, we don't want war, right? What do we want? We want peace. We don't want crime. We don't want violence. We want our families to thrive. We want other people to thrive, no matter who they are. We want people to get along. We want people to smile and laugh and enjoy life. We want people to prosper. We want people to work hard and take pride in their work. And we want people to get along. We don't want to send away our children to fight in a war, to kill other children who have been sent out to fight in a war. War is of the harlot, and the harlot benefits financially from war. This isn't something everyday commoners would sit around a table and go, I have a good idea. Let's go to war and just kill everybody. Okay. And you could say that about really all of the aspects of the harlot when you start to look at how she sits on many waters, where she's at, what she's doing. If you were stop and think, like, would people ever, let's just think of an example, and then I'll erase it because I need the space. But the harlot sits on many waters. So where is she? Where else? Where else? I'm probably missing a couple, but just think about it. When people sit around and say, I know, let's make some music videos that are rich in sexual content, drugs, alcohol, and violence, and let's show them to young people. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Let's make movies that are filled with sex and violence and blood and crime and blasphemies and cursing and disturbing content, horror, monsters. And let's have our young people watch that. No regular, everyday human being like you or me would think that's a good idea. And if someone sitting at the table brought it up, everybody would condemn that person. And yet, what do we have? What do we have? What about our education system? When the education system first came about, it was about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Is that what it is today? No. And they're starting earlier and earlier and earlier to incorporate new ideologies, new concepts. And then, what about food? Would people sit around and go, I know, let's create junk foods filled with chemicals and preservatives and poisons. People will buy them and eat them and get sick. And then they'll need to go to this group to get medicine. And who gets rich from all of this? From all of these ideas? It's the people at the top. So if you really start to think about how she's infiltrated everything, you'll start to see that these aren't ideas that everyday normal people would come up with. And in fact, if someone did come up with, let's have a civil war and send our children off to fight it, people would not go along with that. It's not something normal. It's not something wholesome or good. None of this stuff is. I know when I first was kind of introduced to this idea of the harlot and the elites and sitting at the top and controlling all things, it was like, oh, I don't know about that. It was kind of hard to believe. Well, there's this thing called cognitive dissonance, which basically means when something's really hard to believe, you don't believe it because it's so hard to believe. Doesn't mean it's not true, though. So, this stuff, it all makes sense to me personally. And we see it here in the pages of our Bible being described, this harlot, this so-called harlot. All right, so she's drunk with the blood of the saints. She has been drinking the blood of the saints. We're meant to understand that God-fearing people have died at her hand. Drunk with the blood of the saints. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Now, John is not just saying I stood there and was just like in shock, at what he was seeing. He wondered with great admiration. Wondered with great admiration. All you have to do, maybe you can relate to this and maybe you can't. If you ever were a teenager and you went to your first concert, big concert with those celebrities up on the stage playing their guitars and singing, and my first concert was Bon Jovi, and I remember being swept away with emotions when that concert started. I remember really just being shocked by the experience I was having in my physical body. The adrenaline, just being overcome, looking at those band members up on the stage and just like, one of them, you think they made eye contact with you and you about have a heart attack. It's this, what I call the celebrity effect. Okay. And remember, going back to idolatry, we're meant, on the throne of our hearts is meant to be God, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and God alone. And God is our celebrity, so to speak. Our focus, our attention, our energy, our consideration are primarily meant to be for God. And Satan comes along and says, we're going to create celebrities. And the focus is going to come away from God, and the consideration is going to come away from God, and it's going to be placed on these idols, these stars, which is interesting because Revelation talks about stars and they're angels, and they're fallen angels, and they're filthy angels. And here we've created a whole industry of people, celebrities that we look up to, that we think are the amazing and the best. And we, if they tell us who to vote for, we're like, yay, and all this kind of stuff, because they're celebrities and they have this celebrity effect on us. And this is what was happening to John. He saw the harlot. She was arrayed in purple. She had the golden cup and was wearing the pearls. She had the name Mystery Babylon on her forehead. And how does he react? He wonders with great admiration because she is full of power and wealth and beauty that goes with that, right? Those pearls and that purple, probably charm, right? And so he wonders in great admiration at the harlot. He's standing there and he's finding himself wondering in great admiration. I remember that experience I had at that Bon Jovi concert. I had kind of a revelation, not in the moment, but later. I was thinking about how when I was a young girl, like probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and I was watching TV, this documentary about Elvis, and it was showing these girls in black and white at an Elvis concert or at an Elvis getting his signature or something like that. And they were just proclaimed, and they were passing out, and they were sobbing. They were wailing. They were overcome with emotion. And I remember just as a little girl thinking, that is so weird. That is so silly. What's the matter with those girls? That's so crazy. But a similar thing happened to me at that Bon Jovi concert. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't even a big fan. Just some girlfriends were like, I got tickets. Do you want to come? I'm like, sure. And we went. And yet I wondered with great admiration at this celebrity on the stage who was wealthy and powerful and beautiful and charming and talented. All right. I wondered with great admiration. Verse 7, and the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman. The angel, he wakes John up and he says, what are you marveling about? Come back to reality. I'm going to tell you who this woman really is. I'm going to tell you who she really is. He says, I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And then the angel goes on to kind of crack this code open here. We're going to go ahead and move down a little bit because I don't want to focus on the beast in this Bible study. I want to focus on the woman. Verse 9 says, here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. All right, so this woman, this harlot, she sits on 7 mountains. Okay, remember she sits on the beast, and he's saying she sits on 7 mountains, and he said, and there are 7 kings. So there's a king. I'm putting a little crown on each of these. The harlot sits over these 7 mountains with the 7 kings. So I think these are empires. Okay, each of them has a king, and the harlot is she even controls these 7 empires. And when I say empires, I mean throughout history, right? Like the Persian and the Syrian and the Roman and the Egyptian. I think it's probably talking about 7 specific empires that the harlot has sat over, and she has sat over their kings. And we're going to see here that these kings, that this beast was involved or influenced or was each of these kings. I didn't mean to get into this. Now we've opened up the can of worms. So just really quick, it says there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is yet to come. So remember, we have to go back to the moment that John is being talked to by this angel. And the angel is saying that 5 have fallen. Okay. And this one is. So at the day of, John is there, he's alive, it's, his time. There was an empire, a great empire, ruler of the known world of that time. And of course, it was the Roman Empire. So he's saying the 5 have fallen and 1 is, and the other is not yet to come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So this empire here, this 7th king, when it rises to have its empire, it will be for a very short time. And this will be the king that rises to power right before the beast rises for his reign. Okay, and that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excuse me. The 6th one is the one that is. The 7th one is the yet to come. Okay, this one's prophetic for the future. And he must continue a short space. And the beast that was not and is, even he is the 8th. So the beast is going to destroy the 7th, and the beast is going to be killed. He's going to come back to life, and he's going to become the 8th. We'll do another Bible study where we get into more depth. But remember, it's the harlot that sits on top of all of this. She's in cahoots with these kings. She's very much in cahoots with them, interaction with them, fornicating with them. I scratch your backs, you scratch mine. Okay, but the verse I want to get back down to, here is verse 12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet. So it's this idea, prophetically speaking, that there will be on the world scene these 10 kings. They're not real kings. They're people that rise up to a position of great power, which have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive power as kings for 1 hour with the beast. So there's going to be for 1 hour, and this little 1 hour comes up many times in the book of Revelation, and all of them, with the exception of one, are talking about the same thing. They're talking about the single hour, that's the hour, day, month, and year. That is the destruction of the harlot. Okay, so here it's talking about that. It's talking about these 10 kings are going to receive power as kings for 1 hour with the beast. So put a pin in that, because that's actually what we're going to talk about here in a minute. We're going to talk about the destruction of the harlot that's going to occur in 1 hour. Verse 13 says, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So these 10, whatever they are, rulers, they're going to give their power to the beast for 1 hour. Let's go down to verse 15. And he saith unto me, this angel still talking to John, the waters which thou sawest, remember he saw the harlot seated upon many waters. The waters which thou sawest were where the whore sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Let's get back over here. The water is the peoples, nations, multitude, and tongues. Okay, so we know that she sits on many waters, which are everywhere, but we also know that this involves the people of all the world. Okay, getting back to, I erased it, that list that I created of all the places she's infiltrated. She's infiltrated the whole world, and she's infiltrated the systems of the world that involve and affect people. Where the whore sitteth are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Okay, these 10 leaders, these 10 people of great power that rise to positions of power that aren't necessarily kings. It says they hate the whore. Going back to our original list, the whore gets used until she's no longer of value. Right? And she controls everything. Okay. And so what happens oftentimes when you're in a position, not you and me, but we'll see this in movies or in history, where, or even like, criminals, they all go into like rob a bank and they're going to split everything 50-50, amongst each other. And then one of them gets greedy and kills everybody else because he wants to take all the money. Okay, these 10, along with the beast, they want to kill the harlot so they can join the beast and rise to ultimate power. Does this make sense? It makes sense. But it says, they shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate and naked. Okay, so the 10 kings plus the beast, they hate her. And they're going to make her desolate, okay, and naked. Desolate means an attack to destroy, and naked means ashamed. Okay, so not only do they want to destroy her, they want to humiliate her. They hate her. They want to bring her down. Not only just bring her down a notch, but they want to bring the system down. It says they make her desolate and naked and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Here we have the first indication that how she's going to be destroyed, and it's with fire. And we'll see it later. It's going to say she's destroyed with fire, smoke, and brimstone. Verse 17, for God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will. This is God's idea. He puts it in their hearts to fulfill his will. Remember, this is his judgment on the harlot, but he's going to use the 10 kings of the beast to get the job done. God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So remember, they're going to give their authority to the beast for 1 hour. I think that's right. Verse 13, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They have one mind, it says. Now, I don't know if that could have something to do with technology, like hive mind technology, or it could just mean they all agree. Let's take her out. These have one mind, verse 13, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Okay, whatever power and strength they have, whatever authority that they have, they're going to release it. They're going to relinquish it to the beast. Here's what I think. I think we're talking about some type of an orchestrated attack, whether it's with missiles, ballistic missiles. It could be an inside kind of a terrorist on boots on the ground kind of a job. But when we start talking about fire, smoke, and brimstone, I think we're talking about a major orchestrated something. If you know what I mean. We're going to get into chapter 18 now to kind of expound upon this idea. The last verse here says, in the woman, verse 18, the woman which thou sawest is that great city. What's the great city? Well, it's Mystery Babylon the Great. It's Babylon. The woman is Mystery Babylon. It takes us back to the original Babylon so we can understand what the agenda is here. It's anti-God. It's anti-God. Is the great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. The harlot reigns over the kings of the earth. Always has, is today. Okay, so then we go into chapter 18. It says, after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. Now, I don't think this is an ordinary angel. I think this is talking about Jesus, which even in the Old Testament, the Lord this angel was referred to as the Lord. And here we have in Revelation, we have a couple of instances where we're talking about this angel, but based on the descriptors, we know without a shadow of a doubt that it's talking about Jesus. Now, in this case, there's a little bit of a shadow of a doubt. It says he has great power. That could be an angel. Angels have great power. But it says the earth was lightened with his glory. I think it's talking about Christ here. It doesn't really matter. What the angel says, though, is it says he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. The cage, that's prison imagery. The cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So I think what this is telling us is that there's a geographical location, maybe on the earth, maybe elsewhere, I don't know, Babylon. Maybe it's the exact original Babylon, maybe not. And it will be the holding place for these guys. Maybe that's where the lake of fire will be. It says that it's become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit. We're talking about demons here, right? Like spirits that are looking for a body to inhabit. Demons, foul spirits, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Same thing, like birds that are possessed with demonic spirits. Babylon is going to become that cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So when Babylon goes down and many of these Babylonian entities die, this is where they end up. Let's keep going. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. All nations have drunk of the wine. This means all of us. All of us on some level or another have engaged with Babylon because she's everywhere, right? From the minute you are enrolled in kindergarten, you're engaging in the Babylonian system. If you've ever gone to a pharmacy or a hospital, you're engaged in the Babylonian system. If you've ever voted, you've engaged in the Babylonian system. If you've watched, a movie that's come out of Hollywood or listened to music, you're engaging in the Babylonian system. All nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. So it's the kings of the earth that commit fornication with her, but all the nations drink. They drink of her wine. Then they're drunk. This is the second time. Remember in Revelation 17, verse 2, it says, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk. They've been made drunk. What happens when we're drunk? We make bad choices. We're in a stupor. We're more likely to do things that make our life go downhill. When we're drunk all the time. Some drunks are mean when they get drunk. Some drunks are loud when they get drunk. They do things that make other people uncomfortable so there's a lot of negative connotation to this idea of being drunk. And it says all nations have drunk of the wine, and all nations are drunk on her wine. We're drunk. We're asleep, right? When you think of a drunk, they come home and they pass out. They make bad choices. They don't see the bigger picture. They have limited visibility. They have weak reflexes, make poor choices, all of this kind of stuff. Oops. So all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth. So it mentions three groups here. It's the nations, the kings, and the merchants. The merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So to wax rich means to grow wealthy. They've grown wealthy through the abundance, the great abundance of her delicacies. And the word delicacy means luxury. So the merchants of the earth have grown rich from her luxury, right? We're going to start talking about commodities here. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." Now, to me, this is kind of the crux. This verse right here is the crux of the study, because we have a warning from this angel who I think is Christ. Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Now, remember, on the timeline, when the beast rises to power, I believe on that very same day, he's going to destroy the harlot. That's the very first thing he's going to do, right? Because she's in control of everything, and he wants to be in control of everything. So that's action number one, destroy the harlot. Back here is when the 24 elders go up, the multitude is seen in heaven, the 144,000 are seen in heaven. So all these guys are already in heaven when the beast rises to power. On this day, a third of the earth is going to die with the destruction of this harlot. And so there's a warning. Excuse me. Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. Remember, plague and wrath are synonymous. And there's going to be wrath or plague poured out onto the world here by the beast in order to destroy the harlot. Now, we don't need to worry about this in terms of, we're not even going to be here if all of this is accurate. We're going to be in heaven on this day when a third of the earth died. But even the people that are alive on the earth, to die on this day will be better than to be on the earth during this reign of the beast. Why? Well, because the beast is going to be just as charming and just as deceitful and just as alluring and seductive as this harlot. Okay? We haven't gotten to that yet, but the beast is. They stand in awe of the beast as well. And when this day happens, what's going to happen is the merchants of the earth are going to wail because all of the commodities of the earth are going to be destroyed, which I think there's going to be a massive targeted attack on all the ports of the world. Very likely. If you ever do like a Google image search of like the greatest ports of the world, like, Shanghai and Hong Kong and some of these places, they're all around the world and they sit on the water, by the way. These ports where there's as far as you can see, just stacks and stacks of these cargo, boxes that carry commodities across the oceans. Anyway, when that is all destroyed, all the economies of the earth are going to collapse. Excuse me. And the beast has his own system, right? He has his own monetary system that's going to involve the mark on the wrist and on the forehead. So when the harlot is destroyed, the economies of the world are going to collapse, which will make it really easy for him to roll out his monetary system, which is this mark. But let's get back to this warning. Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins and that you receive not of her plagues. One, we don't need to worry about this if we're believers. We're already going to be in heaven, most likely, unless we're part of this group of victorious survivors here. So when the warning comes, it's a warning at that literal time, come out of her, my people. But again, I don't think it's going to mean, if you're sitting in class, you need to run because you're in the, school, or if you're sitting in the hospital, you need to run because you're in the hospital, or if you're, sitting in front of your television, you need to run. I don't think that's a literal, like, come out of her in that sense. But the warning here is really important. And I think what the warning is, it's to understand that there is this system, this harlot that's at the top, that runs the whole shebang, that has control, the ultimate control, undescribable wealth, power, control. They've drunk the blood of the saints. They've made the whole nations of the world drunk with her deception. We need to understand the reality of everything, because what this does is it helps us to draw near to our Lord. It helps us to get into the Word, because it makes us want to understand these things a little bit better. It makes us curious about what God is doing, how it's all going to work out. What does he say in the Bible? So to have a better understanding of the harlot, I believe it helps the believer strengthen their faith and cling to God and to fear God, right? That healthy fear of God that God wants his children to have, just like a good father wants his children to have a healthy fear of him. So if he says, get out of that street, they get out of that street in time to not get smushed by the truck that was coming down the road. God wants us to have a healthy fear of him. And when we read a story like, about this harlot and we start to understand that she's at the top and she is in control and that she has an agenda, a dominion agenda and a brainwashing agenda and an agenda of control without any care for the needs of the people at the bottom, only a care for herself and her family, then we start to have a healthy fear of the Lord. We cling to him, we cling to his word, and it's a good thing. As far as coming out, I think that's important too. And it's something each of us has to come one-on-one with the Lord and talk to the Lord about. Right? Let's not forget that Jesus he's the head of the body. He is in control of the body. You and I are members of the body. He is the head. And so we can go to our Lord anytime and say, Lord, what about this? Will you guide me on this? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to come out of this church? Do you want me to come out of this school? Do you want me, like right now, what do you want me to do right now? And chances are he'll say, nothing. You're right where I want you. Don't worry about it. Or he might say, I do. I want you to stop doing this. Or I think this is an issue. Whatever that may be. And I'm not even going to give examples. It's going to be different for everybody. It's going to be different for everybody. So where the Lord may be kind of guiding me to come out of certain things, he might be guiding you in other areas. I'm not so much worried about, where he might be guiding me. So again, I don't want to get into that with too much detail, but we can ask the Lord. We can ask him right now, Lord, you are the head of the body. I want to submit to your will. Will you please guide me when it comes to this harlot and how any ways that I am engaged with her, will you guide me out wherever you want me to come out? Will you do that now? Will you start working on that now? If that's something that, is important and needs to be done. Will you help me to come out now? And I trust you. I believe that if you're obedient to that, and he'll give you the courage, we can ask God for the courage to be faithful in these things, to be obedient in these things. You'll be blessed by it, even though you might think, oh, I can't do that. I can't give that up. If the Lord is guiding you to come out of it, there will be a great blessing at the end. So one more time, I heard another voice of heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins and that you receive not her plagues. Again, I don't think this is literal, like right before this hour of destruction. I don't think it's like a call to run and get out, because survival is not the goal here. Remember, a third of the earth is going to die on this day. And to die will actually be the better. You'll be better off to die. Even if you go into Sheol, it'll be better off, I believe, than to live during the reign of the beast. That's my understanding. So come out. And then it talks a little bit about, it says, her sins have reached into heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. I think what this is saying is the sins of the harlot have reached unto heaven. Like God is saying, enough is enough, no more. It's time. Her sins have reached into heaven, and God hath remembered. And it's not like he has a recollection of her sins. It's saying that he hasn't forgotten a single solitary thing that she has done since the beginning of time, since the foundation of the harlot. He's forgotten nothing. Not a crime, not a murder, not a war. No drop of blood has been forgotten in God's eyes. All, he says, God hath remembered her iniquities. And then it talks about her judgment. Verse 6, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double. So the justice and the judgment of God concerning this harlot is that she has to take on double what she has dished out. Not so good for the harlot. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. We're talking about wealth, luxury, power, fame, pleasure, popularity. Although popularity, most of us probably don't even know who these people are. So they're not popular to us, but in their own circles. She's glorified herself. There's vanity, there's self-righteousness, there's pride. She's lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen. She thinks she's a queen. She thinks she's royal. She thinks she's at the top. And for a very long time, she has been. I sit a queen, he says, and I am no widow. This is what the harlot says. I sit a queen and I am no widow. A widow is alone. A widow no longer has a partner to provide for her, to partner with her, to encourage her, to support her, to scratch her back. Okay, and she's saying, I am no widow. She says, I shall see no sorrow. She's basically saying, like, I'm at the top, I always will be. No one's ever gonna rebel against me. I'll never be a widow. I'll always be a queen. I shall see no sorrow. So she's very cocky. Verse 8, therefore shall her plagues come in one day. This comes back to this single hour. Here it mentions one day, but elsewhere in Revelation it references this single hour. Her plagues shall come in one day, death and mourning and famine. So when we talk about death and mourning and famine, these are the consequences of war. So again, I think the destruction of the harlot will be something that's in place by this seventh king. He'll have everything kind of poised and ready and organized. All it needs is, the word go. Everything will be in place. The weapons, the bombs, the traitors, the agitators, the armies, the soldiers, whatever it is, they'll all be poised and ready for the command to go. But then the eighth king is going to rise, and he's the one that's going to say, go. And he is going to have a target on everything that's connected to the harlot. And I think these ports will be a big primary, anything big, like big ports, big business, big tech, big, big, big. You guys can fill in the blanks. I think you know what I'm talking about. I don't think he's going to blow up, the preschool down at the end of the street or the little white church, in downtown kind of a thing. We're talking about big. Therefore her plagues shall come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. There's mentions fire again. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her. So this is saying that the kings stand afar off and they see her being destroyed. So the destruction isn't necessarily aimed at the kings. We're going to see it's aimed at the commodities. Okay. The kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. So again, I think these are going to be different targeted areas all around the world. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is come thy judgment. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. Now it's going to talk about the merchandise. Now, this is listing commodities of the day. So we're meant to, again, to understand the symbolism here. Today, the commodities of our day are probably different, although some of them are the same. What's very, very valuable today is a little bit different than what was valuable then. Okay, but the symbolism is what we have to pay attention to. This is talking about worldwide commodities. And the people who got wealthy from those commodities are crying out over the death of the harlot. Okay, verse 12, the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and of iron, and marble, cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, wine, and oil, fine flour, wheat, and beasts. This would be like livestock and so forth, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and the souls of men. This commodity list includes the souls of men, which means even the souls of men can be bought and sold, as far as the harlot is concerned. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly. This goes back to expensive, luxurious. Dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. Again, what I'm seeing here is an attack on the ports, the places of trade, and just blowing up all of that merchandise. What that would do, one, it would cause a world war to ensue because, maybe you think this country is invading you or you think that country is invading you. They're blowing up your ports. It must be your enemy. Must be our enemy. They just attacked our ports. So then there's a counterattack. So this starts a world war. But if all of the ports are attacked, then what ensues is famine and death, which is what it says up here. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, mourning, famine. In 1 hour, in 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught. And that's all it would take. With today's technology, a simultaneous strike on just a few of the major ports of the world, and then, counter strikes that would start, this major world war. In 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and the ships and the sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off. So people are going to be able to see the smoke in the distance. Like there's a major port in LA. There's a major port in Long Beach, on the coastline of California. There are many major ports in China. They're in Japan, all around the world. Just look up major ports of the world and you'll see like the top 50 come up. They're everywhere. People are going to stand afar off and see the smoke billowing up, and they're going to cry. It says in verse 18, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? And it's not talking about the city where the destruction is happening. It's talking about Mystery Babylon. She's the one that's burning. And they cast dust on their heads and cried. Now, this was custom. So the original readers of the original penned word would have understood that this was an action, an outward action that represented mourning. Casting dust on your head. They cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city. Finally, finally, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Now, remember, there will be survivors. Harlot members will survive this attack, but they will be included in those 7 bowls, is what Revelation says. So the remnant of these guys that survive, they'll be alive during the reign of the beast. They'll worship the beast, or maybe some of them will try to revolt against the beast. I don't know. It doesn't say, but they'll be alive during the reign of the beast, and then they'll be swept up when those 7 bowls come down. Verse 20, rejoice over her, thou heaven. Who's in heaven at the destruction of the harlot? Well, all these guys are all in heaven at the destruction of the harlot. Almost all believers. Anyone that dies on this day and they're believers, they'll go into heaven and they'll be rejoicing. And then these people that are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord, they'll be here during the reign of the beast, but everyone else is in heaven. Rejoice over her. Rejoice over who? Babylon. Thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. Remember, the 5th seal martyrs were crying out, how much longer, God, until you avenge those who dwell upon the earth that are killing our brethren? Those are the martyrs of the harlot. Rejoice over her, thou heaven. So this is talking to those members of the multitude too. And ye holy apostles and prophets. I actually think these 3 groups, this is the first time I actually noticed this, but this is talking to 3 groups. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets. I don't know, we won't get into it. God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. This is going back to tradespeople, people who offer goods and services, the commodities themselves, products. The voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. No craftsman or whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. The idea here is that there's been an attack on the harlot and she is going down. She won't entirely be destroyed on that day, but for the most part, there will be a major destruction of the harlot. It says, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The harlot uses sorceries. Okay. Which, when we look this up in the Strongs, it says it's the word pharmakia, and a lot of people bring that straight back to, the big what. This. But sorceries, it means spells. Okay, we're talking about black magic here. We're talking about the use of black magic. Very high among the members of the harlot. We're talking about witchcraft. By thy sorceries were all nations deceived. So when we think about a rock song or a TV show or a movie, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that sorcery ship, that witchcraft, I wouldn't be surprised if there's spells cast over so many different things that we're exposed in and that we ingest and that we consume. That there's been spells placed on those things so that we're deceived, so that we just go deeper and deeper and deeper into that drunkenness. Okay, and thankfully, the Spirit of the living God lives in people and protects us from that to a degree. It helps if we are partnering with the Spirit and fanning that flame and not allowing that flame to grow dimmer and dimmer and dimmer by walking further and further away from God. So we don't need to worry so much about the exposure, that our children, because we have prayer, we have the word, we have the love of God, we have the Spirit of God. We can rely on all of these things to protect us in the big picture and in the long run. Yeah, along the way, we have probably committed crimes against our God because we've been deceived by the harlot, right? I can't tell you how many times when I was a teenager, I took the Lord's name in vain because I thought it sounded cool to talk like a valley girl, which involves taking the Lord's name in vain. I'm sure this really saddened the Lord that I was being drawn further and further away from God because of this sorcery, right, that had been placed in my life and that I'd been exposed to. The merchants were great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Last verse. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. All right, guys, I got to get going, so we're going to wrap it up there. But I knew that was going to be a long one. I'm surprised I even was able to do it in one video. But so this gives us an indication as to what Revelation is talking about when it talks about this harlot. I hope this helps you to better understand. So I would just encourage you just to talk to the Lord today and ask, I heard this, there's this thing, and the harlot, and come out of her, my people, Lord Jesus, I submit myself to you. Will you just guide me in whatever this looks like for my life? So that's my prayer for you today. It's my prayer for myself and for my loved ones, that God would really just keep drawing us to Jesus. And that's the main thing, is that we draw close to Jesus. There might be something specific that the Lord is calling you out of today, but more importantly, he's drawing you closer. He wants you to cling to Jesus day by day, moment by moment. Every morning when you open your eyes, think about Jesus. Every night when you lay your head down on the pillow, think about Jesus. When you wake up in the night to use the bathroom, think about Jesus. And throughout the day, think about Jesus. And if you're saying to yourself, wow, there's no way I can think about Jesus that much, ask the Lord to draw you to Jesus, because I know there was a time in my life where I would have thought that. There's no way. And yet here I am. I love the Lord. God has really helped me to fall deeper and deeper in love with him. There was a time I didn't understand, how do you love somebody you've never seen or touched or met in person? Like, how do you even do that? Well, if you ask the Lord to help you fall more deeply in love with him, he'll do it, because that's what he wants too. He wants to be in relationship with you. So if you're wondering how you can be thinking more consistently about Jesus throughout your day, ask the Lord. Ask the Lord to guide you and to lead you to Jesus throughout the day. Ask him to help you to consider him, to ponder him, to talk to him, to reflect upon him, or just to abide with him, which is simply put away your phone, turn off the TV, maybe just sit next in the sun somewhere and say, here I am, Lord. And 30 seconds later, you might be thinking about something else, but God wants us to do that. He wants us to enter into his presence and say, here I am, Lord. God, fill me with your Spirit. You could say those two things. Here I am, Lord. God, fill me with your Spirit. I'm here. I want to abide in your presence. And I believe he'll honor that. I know he's honored it in my life. So I got to get going. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. God bless.